Okay, hello everybody. So, as you guys are all aware, the midterm is coming up this week. So, this week in section, we were going to have a review and just cover all the things you need to know. But since one of my sections is on Thursday, I've decided for those who would attend that section in that class, I feel like you guys would be at a disadvantage if I post this and do this class live. I've decided I will record this beforehand, and then I will post it on Gotcha Space and send a link out via email, just so everybody has adequate time. I will definitely go back to the live sections though, but this week we will be doing recorded for that reason. So live sections will resume next week after midterm. This way, everybody has the same amount of time, theoretically, to watch the video, show up the office hours if you have questions, email me or post on Piazza. So we're first just going to start with creating databases. So we know we need a data step, and then we'll start with week 1 material. That's what we'll be starting with first. So since we'll be typing these in, we'll use input, and I'll have num for a number, and character for a character, and we know our character values need to have a $sign, character. Then we will have our data lines. This is, we would know the same, we could also use cards here. So if you see one or the other, don't be surprised. So we have num, so 1A, 2B, 3C, and we will run this. And then we have our numbers and our characters. So that was pretty much some of the most information we learned on the first group. We also used our proc print. And remember, our proc print, we only need our data is equal to week 1 material. And then we will run it. So this will be how we can print our material. And we see our observations here. We have our numbered observations, the number, and our character. And we can make this a noobs. So as all you guys should be aware, that noobs removes our observations column. So now we just have our number and our character. So I will comment that in. Observations, columns, or column. Now we can also add in our label. So let's say I want to add in a label up here. We would have our character and make the character label is equal to letter grade. So we will run that. And yes, we do not need the equals. So the equals is not needed. So we do need the equals. We'll see what the error is. Oh, yep, I forgot the semicolon. So we forgot the semicolon here. So running this again, that should now work. But you see, when we run this, it'll just be number and character still, even though I've added the labels in here. And let's say proc print without the label, still with the noob, so we shouldn't have our observations. We see our non-observations, but our characters still have character. So in order to fix this, I will need to add our label here. And by doing that and adding our label statement, I now get our letter grade compared to our number. So that is how we use letter grade. And then we can also remember we use formatting. So data, we will use format example. So input X, Y, Z. And these are all numeric. I hope you guys, so this was going to be similar to the example we went over in, I guess you could say week, was it week 1 or week 2? So here we're going to do our format. We're going to make Z the comma of 4.2. And yes, for we do not want our colon there when we're using our format. We just want it to be one word. And then 4.2, that would be the same thing. Remember, we use dollar also. So those are 2 examples. So now we're going to have our data lines. And then we know from our spaces above, our X we would expect to be 1, our Y we expect to be 2, and Z should be 4 spaces with 2 decimal places. So we'll do 1, 20, and then 12.23, 1, 12, and then 9.21, 2, 4, and then we'll run this. Just first, we'll actually run this without the format just to see how it looks. So here we see we have our X, Y, and Z. And even though just in our basic run, our numeric value does take in extra spaces, and we will double check just to see how this happens when we print this out. So now when we print this out using our prox print statement, we see that it still takes in those extra places. And it actually changes our format now. So now we have an extra 0. So all of our spaces now take up 1 more. And if you look at this, we have 12.230. When in our input, we just had 12.23. And the same happened here. So now we're going to add our format it and see how this works. Got to make sure I get the run. So now we see that our 12.23 gets cut off along with our 9.324. Both of the last numbers here gets cut off, and that's because when we count our places, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. So we need that extra spot right in our to include the period. And that is the same if we want to do comma. So when you do 12.2, we first count we go from left to right. So we count in 1, 2, 3, 4. We know that's when we must stop. So even if we count in a comma or any other symbol, it would include those also. But given the how we were doing it, it just cuts off our 12.3, the 3 in that, and the 4 on 9.324. So the dollar works the same way. And of course, remember when we have, we'll make this comma 8. So we'll make this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We'll run this just to see how this works. So we know we have 8 spaces. So running these, we'll just see how the comma works. And we know the comma will add the comma. So as you see here, it actually cuts off some of our values. Let me look at that. And that is there. So as we see, it changes the values there and changes how it appears. So move this up to 12. So we got to make sure we have our proper number. And I believe this will still be short. Yep. But as we see, the comma works here now, and the comma does appear there too. So we should be good. So now moving on to inputting and creating libraries. So we can input data in 2 ways. So the first way we showed was in file. So data cars. So in file. So this was in my folder. I go to the cars data set, go to the properties, get the path location here. And when we do this, we will also need to figure out the variables we want to input. So here we have our car, the type of car, the location, and cylinders. So input car, type, manufacturer. So I'll just call that manu. And then cylinders, and we know cylinders would be the only characteristic. And then we can just do run. And we see those all appear. And actually, yes, we are good. But if I wanted to put a number value in for our cylinders, I would need 2. So there we go with that. And then the other way is with lib name. So we will have, as we've shown this before, the class. So I have our class data sets. I will copy this, the path yet again. Then I will have our data. And since we've been working on ensure a lot, so I'll do an ensure example. We will have set class dot ensure. And I can run. And this will keep all of our variables. Oh, that is the, yep, I will need to also run the lib name. So this will keep everything, all of our columns. And if I wanted to save our ensure into a file that will always be there, I will call this review under midterm. So I will create a new folder in a new path, and this will be review underscore midterm. And now we will just rerun this. Oh, yes, it has to be a valid SAS name. So we'll just call this review. There we go. So we can go down to our libraries. We now have the review, but nothing is in there. And as we know, when we're working in our work folder, that is our default. And when looking back at the code, if I don't add a class dot beforehand, like this, so when I use this class dot, it'll go to our class library. And we know that class library is all of these from our class data sets. And here I just created this new review folder. So if I wanted to save our ensure.ex into the review, and this will make sure it be in a more temporary folder, then we could do that. Review is right there. So we could do that. I just got to make sure I spell it right. So we'll just continue. Since we know it is there. So that would be how we wanted to create that. Just wanted to show that. We won't really use that. I won't use that again. But just to show that, because I know I got some emails on that. So data, our ensure ex example. So here I want to keep, well, we'll also need to say what we want to work on. So we're working on ensure ex. And I will want to keep the balance due. That'll be it. So we will run. And we see we have our one column of just balance due. Now, if I wanted to drop balance due to show the difference between keep and drop, we can do that also. So I'll need to do set class dot ensure. I'm using class.ensure because over here I overwrote the ensure.ex in our work folder. So I'll need to go back to our folder here. So here I will drop balance due and run. So here dropping will remove the balance due. We see we'll have all the columns, ID, name, policy, company, percent insured in total, besides our balance due. So that is the difference between keep and drop. And of course, we can add keep equals up here. So if we want to do keep ID, name, balance due, we could do that. And we could add another insure underscore two. And then here we can keep is equal to just ID. So doing this, we will be able to create two data sets, our insure2, which will have the ID, and our insure.ex, which will have the ID, name, along with balance due. And we're taking these all from our class insure. So now running this, we see our insure2 as just our IDs. And you guys may be wondering, where is the other data set? So we'll go up to their table, column up here, hit the drop down, and then we need to click on our work.insure underscore ex. And here we see our ID, name, and balance due. So I'm going to go continue to work on our insure underscore ex. So we're going to proc sort now. So proc sort, our data is equal to insure underscore ex. We'll be sorting by. Let's go with balance due, because that's what we've done often. And then run. So here now, since we've sorted by our balance due, we have our smallest balance due at the top, and that continues downwards. So now we're going to sort by balance due and name. So we'll go by both of them, but first we're going to sort by balance due. So see, all the zeros are still up top, but then we're going to sort by our name. So depending on our name, if any of our balances due are the same, which there are, we have some similar zeros. Many students have zero. It will reorganize all the names to have a zero from decreasing order. So when we go downwards, that'll work. So now that is, I guess, the main things we have covered. We've also covered concatenating data sets. So that would be our proc merge. So I'll do a quick one of that. So data temp one. So input X, Y. Data lines. So we'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Run. Data temp 2. So we'll have our input XZ. So we'll have 1A. This will be a characteristic. So 1A. 3. Oh, I forgot our data lines. So I need the data lines in there so it remembers to read all these things. 3B, 4C, 5Z, and then we'll be running. So we run these two just to make sure that they all worked. And we have our temp one right here. We see all the values there. And our temp two right here. So now we're going to know how to concatenate and merge it together. So just concatenating. So data temp. Since I use temp one and temp two up here, nothing will get rewrit. So set temp one, and then temp two, then run this. Since we're running this together, we see that it just stacks the two on top of each other. So this is our temp one, and then here is our temp two. And yet again, our characteristic values are blank, we have the missing value, and our numerics have the decimal place or the period. So now we're going to see how we can merge them. So data temp merge temp 1 and temp 2 by, we will do X. Now for those wondering why I chose X, we see we have 3 different variables to work with, right? We have X, Y, and Z. We have X and Z in temp 2, and then X and Y in temp 1. And I already know these are sorted out, so I don't have to worry about sorting them. But good practice would be adding a proc sort beforehand. So we'll do that here. So proc sort, got to have the data right here. The temp 1 by X, and then run. And then proc sort our other one. So data is temp 2. So we need to sort all of these by X also, and run. And that's just good practice. And sometimes if you don't do that, it won't work, just depending on the data. So we're going to merge these two together. And I chose X just because both data sets have X in them. And neither, they don't have Y or Z. So if I merge by Y or Z, it would just pretty much concatenate the two again, like in our first example. And here, when we run this, I will include the proc sorts here. We see that we have our temp 1 and our temp 2, and then going to our temp, we see now all of our Z values have been filled in, and we only have one missing Y value. So that will work good there. So that is a good way to use merge. So we've also gone over proc contents. And then we'll use our data. Here I'll be looking at our ensure underscore EX. Then we will run. Contents, not what I saw previously. So looking at some of the important things, we see that it is a work file, the amount of observations and variables I have in here. Remember, this should be our ID, name, and char and balance due. Is it sorted? Yes. If you remember, I sorted it by balance due and then name. So the names that have the same balance due are sorted afterwards. But at first, of course, we'll sort by our balance due because that's what I put in first. And then going down to our alphabetical type variables, we see we have balance, ID, and name. Our balance due is our only numeric, and it has a format of 6.2. And we see that our length is at most 8. And then our ID here, and here our length for both our ID and name. And we have double checked our sort information. It'll output that. And it shows the amount of balance due we own in our name. And is it validated or not? So I believe the last thing we have gone over is, I think we've done a proc means. So we could, that is the last thing I think you guys have covered. So there was a good example in the homework. I don't really have any great stuff here to proc means on. So that is that. So we've used format. So let's go over the things we've covered. So we have created a database. We've used label, noobs. We all in this section and this recording in proc print. We also know that for proc print we can create our labels and our formats in proc print. And when I mean that, I will go up to our proc print sim at the beginning, where we have here, we can add a format option here, along with a label option if we wanted to add more labels. And as we saw this in the previous section, we can do that. I think we've done that actually in the previous two. So you guys should be accustomed to doing that. So we can do it in that. So we have yet we reviewed more formatting and the proper spacing. That's always important. You got to remember that. We also went over real quickly. I pointed out missing variables and types and how they show up. So remember, this means the numeric value and characteristic value show up differently. So if you were outputted with just a proc print, or you just saw the output of the created database, and you saw a period and you saw a blank space and for a missing value in some of the two columns, like we had in our temp, that you should know the difference between the two. You should know which one is characteristic and which one is numeric. I'm sure you guys know how to do that. So we have also went over libname, which is a good way to create a new library. So instead of using infile, we can just use our libname. But we have also used infile. So you guys should be familiar with working on that. And then we did concatenating data together. And then we used merging data. So those are always important. Merging data together. So that is also needed. So we went over this last section. So the concatenating, an example of when we're using concatenations, let's say I have my yearly balances or expenses, and what I want to see, I want to have a master sheet where I have all the expenses I have ever had. So I can add each year I can concatenate my new expenses at the end of the year into my master expense data sheet. So I'll have all my expenses there, and I will be able to distinguish which is which. And then an example when we're merging data sets together is, let's say I have doctor visits and I want to check my heart rate or height and weight. So each time I go in, I can merge and just have a new column. So doctor visit 1, so a lot, and doctor visit all the way to 1000. So as we did here, we don't have those here, but we can add like we did here. So this would be visit 1 in this example, and this could be visit 2. So we have all of the variables or x's in our visit 2, and then I could add my visit 2 on afterwards, just so I could see and track the difference between the two if I wanted, or if I just wanted to make sure that I knew the people had the same name and I had a database of just with people or their identification, I could make sure all the people with that identification are stored in the same file on the same line. And then of course, I can't forget proc sort. So proc sort is very useful along with proc contents. So backslash contents. So those are both useful. Of course, proc sorting, always good to sort data so it's easier to look at. And proc contents, good to look at this just so we can see all the information. Go back in the recording if you want to see the things I've gone over, but I've covered them in section a couple times also. So that's always good to know. And then the two different type of comments, as you guys see here, we have the asterisk and then the colon, but then we also have our backslash asterisk or forward slash asterisk, and then we have closing it with asterisk forward slash. And this is the multi-line comment. Multi-line. So this is the multi-line comment. So that means we can have many lines and all of these are still comments, still commenting. But once I go outside the ending bracket, this is no longer a comment. So I will have to put this into our single line comment, which is an asterisk ended with a semicolon. So that is what is going to be all for the day.